Good morning, everybody. Dave Carley with Entrepreneur MD and davidcarley.com. Joined by Zoe Bedford, my partner. Thank you, Zoe, for being here as always. So, wanted to respond to Sam with Borneo. Thank you, Sam, for reaching out. Sam had a question about legumes. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about legumes. We haven't done a lot of our nutritional posts, but we're going to start doing more and more. But Sam had a question about legumes, and he likes to eat legumes, and he wanted to know our opinion on whether or not these are good or bad or should be eaten or should not be eaten or what. So what are legumes, though? Can you tell us what legumes are? What classes of foods?
So don't make it too complicated. 4 classifications: beans, lentils, peanuts, and peas. And yes, to clarify one thing, peanuts are not nuts. They are not. They are legumes. They're found in shells, typically referred to as seeds.
Right, so beans, lentils, peanuts, peas. That includes chickpeas and different types of beans, kidney beans, as well as other types of beans. So we're going to generalize them, but these are all legumes, a class of foods called legumes. And there's some good and some bad regarding legumes. The good parts, what's good about them? Well, by and large, they have a good amount of fiber. Most people agree fiber is good for you. There's a good amount of protein, a vegan type of protein. And most of them have some healthy fats. So that's good. They're vegan. Most of them are organic, non-processed. They're natural foods. So legumes have some things going for them. What are the bad parts? Well, they are reasonably high in carbohydrate. We're going to introduce 2 concepts. You may or may not have heard of these things: glycemic index and glycemic load. Glycemic index is how quickly a food converts to sugar within your bloodstream. Glycemic load is similar, and glycemic load basically means how quickly a food increases the insulin level in your blood. So that's related to sugar as well. So glycemic and glycemic load we want low. We want those things low. That prevents insulin spikes, and controlling and managing your insulin is good for you. So talk to us about carbs and also lectins, though. What does that mean?
So I'm a big believer that you really should, especially if you're busy and especially if you're trying to keep your diet very simple, to keep your carbohydrates low. And so for me, I avoid legumes. I don't eat them. They're not in my diet. I try to find other healthy substitutes. And if I do need to increase protein, because this is a tough one for vegans and for vegetarians, you are supplementing a large legume load. So then you're dialing into increasing the index and the glycemic load, which is sugar, and your body doesn't know how to process that as well. So I stick to no legumes because of the carbohydrate load on that.
Well, let's look at those loads. So they're a little bit different. So this number is actually the glycemic index. And if you want to find out more about glycemic index, go to Mendoza.com. It's a huge site devoted specifically for controlling diabetes, and it has all kinds of foods in the glycemic index. The lower the better. Beans are a little higher, coming in around 24. Lentils are even higher than that at 32. They're high in carbohydrate. Peanuts are a little lower. They're at 13. Chickpeas in the middle at 28. So again, we're not going to get into a lot of details, but there are carbs in legumes. That's the downside. Now, it's also been called that there's something called lectins. What are lectins, though?
So they're floating around in the blood, and they're receptors, and they help bind carbohydrates to that protein floating around in the blood. That's a little complicated, but if you're eating a lot of legumes, then you're increasing a lot of lectins in your body. And there is a downside to that. So again, this is a whole balance kind of thing.
We did some research on lectins. There's some good lectins and some bad lectins. They're very common proteins. The bad lectins actually, and we won't get into what's good and what bad because there's a million of these things, but the bad lectins, there's some evidence to suggest that it actually can impact your digestive lining. That's a barrier to immunity, preventing pathogens from getting into our system. So bad lectins can be bad for your digestive system, and they can also trigger an immune reaction, inflammation. We're constantly battling inflammation. We don't want inflammation, and any protein which is pro-inflammatory can be bad. So that's the bad part. There's also some good things in lectins. They seem to be involved in regulating protein and carbohydrates in the bloodstream. So they're not all bad, but legumes by and large have higher amounts of lectins compared to some other foods, right?
But again, too, we always talk about, all right, so good food. I'm going to eat a lot of good food, and I go back to this. I make this analogous as well to fruit. Don't overload your diet with fruit because it's good for you. It still is a sugar, and so your body takes excess amounts of things and stores it as fat. One thing I do want to make sure that we touch base on our next video, because Sam asked, should I be eating them or should I not? And while I can't make a recommendation to say whether you should or shouldn't, I just want you to make sure you got the basis of what's going on. How much are you eating? Because it is the soup season. It is cold outside. Everybody's putting tons of beans in their soup and lots of other substitutes that way. So, and the next thing we can talk about a little bit more, which a lot of people ask, is what is a nightshade and should I or shouldn't I be eating it?
So we'll talk about that later. So I think the take-home point is there's some good stuff in lectins, okay? There are carbs to deal with. We want you to keep your carb load down, but that doesn't mean no carb, right? Some carbs are okay. So there's some things going for it, but as long as you're kind of controlling the amounts that you're eating and controlling those carbohydrates and the glycemic load, or how much sugar is in your bloodstream, how much insulin is in your bloodstream. So don't overdo it, but there's some good things to lectins too. So in moderation, in legumes, sorry. Yes. In moderation, right? Let's keep the amounts down so we don't get those insulin spikes, not overdoing the carbs. Some carbs in your diet are good. This is an organic, natural source, a good way to get some carbs and to get some protein if you're a vegan. So good and bad with legumes.
And with good and bad too. So what is it? I think another thing that we can go into next time is when do you eat certain kinds of foods?
Okay. Yeah, let's go into that. Very important point, and we'll continue to post these things. But just a little summary of legumes. Thank you again, Sam, for the question. I hope this is helpful. You can do lots more research online. Check out Mendoza as well for the glycemic stuff. Do your homework, okay? Adding some legumes I don't think is a terrible thing, but as long as you're controlling it, keeping that carb load down, keeping your sugars and insulin down, seems to be okay, but don't overdo it, okay?
And most importantly, don't overcomplicate it. Make your decision, decide what you're going to do, pick your foods, meal prep, and then that helps you with your busy days.
So you guys have a great day. We'll continue to post on other things. Check out the resources on davidcarley.com. Also, of course, Entrepreneur MD on the GCTV network. Thank you, as always, to Zoe Bedford for helping me out with the nutritional stuff. We're going to do some workouts with Zoe as well. And we're going to talk about women and training, women and weightlifting. Huge topic, really important. Zoe's going to help us out with that. Thank you, guys. Have an awesome day.